You woke up this morning and checked your phone. Maybe you grabbed a coffee. Maybe you complained about traffic, or a slow internet connection, or a meeting that could have been an email. And none of that felt strange to you. It felt completely normal. Now imagine all of that is gone. Not taken away gradually. Gone in an instant. You open your eyes and instead of a ceiling, you see open sky instead of a mattress, cold ground instead of a city. Endless forest stretching further than you can see. No tools, no shelter, no one who knows your name. You have been born into 8000 BCE, and the question is not philosophical. It is immediate, physical, and urgent. Would you survive the first week? Most people say yes. They imagine themselves as clever, resourceful. They think about the survival shows they have watched, the camping trips they vaguely remember, the general confidence that comes from never having actually been tested. But the researchers who study prehistoric human survival paint a very different picture. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard has spent decades studying how early humans lived, what they ate, how they moved, and what killed them. His conclusion is not reassuring. The survival toolkit that kept your ancestors alive was not instinct, it was knowledge. Specific, detailed, community-transmitted knowledge that took thousands of years to accumulate and was passed down through every generation. Knowledge you do not have. Think about fire. You probably believe you could make a fire, most people do. But fire making by friction, which is the only method available to you in 8000 BCE, requires knowing exactly which two species of wood to pair together, dried to a precise moisture level, shaped with specific geometry, spun at exactly the right pressure and speed. Get any single variable wrong and you get nothing. Not a spark, not warmth, not cooked food, just a blister forming on your palm in the dark. Archaeologist Thomas Wynne, who has studied prehistoric cognitive skills for over 30 years, argues that the technical knowledge required to produce even basic stone tools would take a modern person months of dedicated practice to replicate. And stone tools were not optional. They were how you processed food, how you made shelter, how you defended yourself. Without them, you are not a prehistoric human. You are prey. Which brings up the second problem. You are now at the bottom of the food chain. Not near the bottom. The bottom. In 8000 BCE, the threats are not hypothetical. Cave lions still existed in parts of Europe. Short-faced bears roamed North America. Wolves hunted in packs large enough to take down animals far bigger than you. And you, standing alone in an unfamiliar forest, smell like fear. You move loudly. You cannot see well in low light. You do not know which direction the nearest predator is coming from, or how to read the silence that falls before an attack. Your ancestors learned that silence. They taught their children what it meant. You were never taught. But here is where it gets more complicated. Because survival in the Mesolithic era was never meant to be a solo exercise. The individual was almost entirely irrelevant. What mattered was the group. Anthropologist Dunbar, famous for his work on social group sizes in human evolution, found that prehistoric humans lived in tight bands of roughly 15 to 50 people. These were not just communities for emotional support. They were functional survival units. One person tracked animals. One person knew where the clean water was. One person knew which plants were edible and which ones killed you in 4 hours. One person knew how to read weather patterns and predict when to move. No single person held all of that knowledge. It was distributed across the group like a network, and the network only worked when everyone was inside it. Drop one modern person into that world alone, and the network does not exist. You cannot recreate it by yourself. You cannot learn in one lifetime what took generations to develop. You are, by the standards of that world, completely helpless. There is something deeply uncomfortable about that realization. You have a university degree, perhaps. You have read books. You can operate complex technology, and none of it helps you, not even slightly, because the knowledge that kept humans alive in 8000 BCE was not the kind of knowledge stored in books. It was embodied knowledge. Kinetic, sensory, practiced. The kind that lives in the hands, not the head. Paleoecologist Kat Anderson, who has studied indigenous land management practices in California, documented how native groups cultivated, burned, pruned, and managed entire ecosystems over thousands of years to maximize food production. What looked to early European explorers like wild, untouched wilderness was actually a highly managed landscape, shaped by centuries of accumulated ecological knowledge. The people living there were not surviving in nature. They were farming it, invisibly using methods so sophisticated and subtle that outsiders literally could not see them. You would not see them either. You would walk through that landscape and see nothing useful. You would not know which berry patches had been deliberately encouraged, which meadows had been burned on a seasonal cycle to drive out game, which riverbends had been modified to make fish easier to catch. It would all look like random wilderness, because without the cultural inheritance to read it, that is exactly what it is. So you would be hungry, cold, probably injured, already dehydrated, because you do not know which streams are safe to drink from, and even in 8000 BCE, waterborne illness was a serious killer. Your feet, soft from a lifetime of shoes, are bleeding. The insects are relentless. And you have no idea, none, whether there are other humans nearby, whether they would help you or treat you as a threat. That last question matters more than most people realize. Prehistoric humans were not universally peaceful. Archaeological evidence of prehistoric violence is extensive. Anthropologist Lawrence Keeley, in his landmark research on prehistoric warfare, documented that violence between groups was common, lethal, and sometimes systematic. Arriving as a lone stranger in unfamiliar territory carried real risk. Without a shared language, shared symbols, or shared cultural markers, you would have no way to signal peaceful intent. No way to explain yourself. You would be an unknown variable in a world where unknown variables often got killed. The realistic answer for most modern humans is that you would not survive the first winter, perhaps not the first month. The combination of lost cultural knowledge, absent survival skills, physical softness, and social isolation would overwhelm you before the cold did. Not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, but because you are the product of a completely different environment. You're exquisitely adapted to a world of abstract systems, digital interfaces, and social institutions. Your brain is genuinely extraordinary. It just solves different problems than the ones that mattered in 8000 BCE. And here's the part that should stop you. Because your ancestors made it. Every single one of them. Through ice ages and drought, through predators and disease, through everything the ancient world threw at them, they survived long enough to have children, who survived long enough to have children, who eventually produced you. That chain is unbroken across hundreds of thousands of years. It never broke once. Which means the gap between you and them is not a gap in intelligence. Your brain is essentially identical to the brain of a human born 50,000 years ago. The gap is cultural. It is knowledge. It is the invisible inheritance that every generation passed to the next, and that you absorbed so naturally, so automatically, that you never once noticed it was there. You drink clean water without thinking about it? You eat food prepared by systems you did not build? You navigate cities using infrastructure laid down before you were born. You are wrapped invisibly in layers of accumulated human knowledge stretching back to the first fire ever made. You did not earn any of it. You inherited it, and it is the only reason you are here. Tonight, when you check your phone again, or grab another coffee, or complain about the meeting that could have been an email, some part of you now knows something you did not know this morning. That ordinary moment you're living in took 10,000 years to build, and every person who came before you paid some part of the price to make it possible. That is not nothing. That is everything.